Hello, fellow book lovers of the internet. It's Cecil, it's Wednesday, and it's time for another writing vlog. It's only been a couple of weeks since our last writing vlog, but I confidently have more things to share, so very exciting times over here. Last time we talked about how I am going to be completely gutting my novel down to its bare bones. It'll have the same soul, the same concept, the same general characters, but the way that the story is told and some of the events in the story are going to just be vastly different. It's intimidating, but the more breakthroughs that I make, the more exciting it becomes. I finally did something that I've been meaning to do for a while, which is starting to dig into my characters' histories. But I think what made it easier was, instead of being like, what is everything that has happened in this character's life, I instead took a more focused approach, which is like, what are some key moments and some key influences in the character's life leading up to how they engage with other characters and with the events in the novel. And kind of tying in history to present was a lot better of an approach, instead of being just like, I don't know, too vague. I started with Aaron, who's my deuteragonist, my secondary main character, because his history has always been the clearest to me. Which, yes, I know, maybe it should be my protagonist who has the clearest history, but what can I say? Aaron's history has more to do with the world building, so it's more involved. First, I wrote down some of the things that I knew for sure, starting with his life in the parallel. I would say both Aaron and Heather, I started with their stories around the time that they were 8. But for Aaron, when he was 8, that was when he was kidnapped into the parallel. And then I went through his interactions with the person who took care of him and trained him when he first came into the parallel. And then I had to ask myself questions that I did not ask myself when I was 15, which are things like, why would they choose a child for this, like, alternate universe world? You can't train a child in the 2-year time span that I'd initially given myself. So how long did it really take? How does this connect back to the world building points we've already established and the new ones we're starting to work on? The more questions I started to answer, the more I understood what happened next, and it started to really tie into what had already existed dynamic-wise and world-building-wise for when Heather enters the parallel. So reaching a moment of having, like, I get it, it's very exciting. Seeing, the way that things that happened to Aaron in his life, how that shaped his view of the world, of being in a parallel universe, and all of that. I kind of started looking into the ways that PTSD and moral injury settled in. Moral injury is like, I don't really know how to put moral injury into words. It's a concept that I learned about, and I'll put a little blurb on the screen so that you can read it. 3 full handwritten pages later, and we have a very clear line of causes and effects that lead Aaron to who he is when he and Heather meet, and why he interacts with her in the ways that he does. It even kind of sets up why their partnership might be more successful than the battle partners that he had been paired with before. And of course, the next character I had to work on was Heather, my protagonist. I don't know a lot about her personal history, or at least I didn't, because going into this, I was thinking, like, she has a normal life. The whole point was, like, she was normal and she was put into very abnormal circumstances, and how would she handle that? But maybe, maybe I have unintentionally projected onto characters, as I think everybody leaves at least a little piece of themselves in a lot of characters that they make, And I think when I made Heather, I definitely left more than a few pieces in her, because she is the main character throughout the entire story, So I had to kind of start unpacking, what are things that I knew about myself when I started writing Heather? What are things I did not know about myself that still ended up getting included without my intention? How can I be more intentional about that? Like Heather ending up autistic coded because I'm autistic, And I didn't know I was autistic when I was 15. I know that now. So, how does that play into her life before? How will it play into her life when she's in the parallel universe? Things like what kind of triggered things like anxiety and depression. There's not always a specific trigger, but obviously that can relate back to things like autism because of the way that existing in a neurotypical world is very overwhelming, overstimulating, and leads to burnout. Um, and there's just like the natural there's the natural amount of energy that masking takes, no matter how hard you no matter how much practice you have at it, you know? And then from there, I started thinking about like leading up to like what situations is she masking in? How many friends does she have? Because I've only given her like one named friend, and that doesn't feel like enough. You know what I mean? I feel like there needs to be more. So I started working. So I started thinking about, you know, the mundane aspects of life, like what extracurriculars would she have taken part in, and what hobbies did she have? What were her interests, and how does that translate into the role that she plays in the parallel? The things that she picks up really quickly and the things that she maybe struggles with a little bit longer. What does what does masking look like for Heather? Has she started to unmask at all? Does she know that she masks? Does she know she's autistic? What does being thrown traumatically into a brand new environment do? How does that change the mask? Would she be able to keep it up under that much stress? Would she have a breaking point? What would that breaking point be? Should that breaking point be a plot point that is explored? How would that drive the story forward? How would that inform the dynamic that she has with the people that she meets in the parallel universe? And then the questions go on and on. I ask questions and I write down my thoughts, and it's very stream of consciousness. I've just been, you know, scribbling down pages in a notebook, but it feels so good to do it. And just writing it by hand has been, I don't know, something about it is just like getting it in my brain, and it's getting my brain working. And I should have known. I should have known writing things down by hand would be an extremely helpful part of this process. I've been trying to do it all digitally, but I benefit from writing things down by hand. Like the first time I ever wrote a book, which I put in quotes because it wasn't super long. It filled an entire cover to cover composition notebook, you know? And I did that when I was in the 6th grade. And writing it down was like good for continuity and like thinking through character things. And I wouldn't say that it was like a good book or anything because I was 12, but it was, you know, it was a story, and writing by hand has always just it's been beneficial to me. You know what I mean? It's good for my brainstorming process. I think that's the important thing, is you've got to find something in your process that works for you the best. But now, some goals. Now we are coming upon December, so it's going to be busy. I'm going to be doing my festive vids and commissions and streammas and all of that stuff. But here are some things I would like to get done for the book if possible. Number 1, finishing what I'm doing with history and motivation for my different characters. The only other major player left to do this for is my antagonist, and I still need to come up with a new name for him. I feel like naming aliens is, you know what? No, it's not just naming aliens. I was gonna go on a whole thing about like naming aliens is hard because you can't like pull from an existing culture, and you don't want to accidentally pull from an existing culture and then be, you know, no. It's not aliens. The problem is not aliens. The problem is that I cannot name characters for the life of me. I don't even name my sim. I don't do names. Heather's name I got by sliding on my keyboard until eventually it became a name. First and last name. That is how I did it. I need to find a name for my antagonist. And the thing is, it is hard with aliens as well because, you know, you want it to be kind of an interesting name, but you don't want it to be like too ridiculous looking, but you also don't want to name your alien Jeffrey. unless you do want to name your alien Jeffrey, in which case do that. But I do not want to name my alien Jeffrey. You know what I mean? So antagonist work. I have to work on the antagonist. Number 2. I want to start piecing together more details about the influential characters from Heather's background. So I've been thinking about how she likely has kind of like 2 main friend groups. I'm trying to figure out where to link 2 main friend groups that kind of exist in slightly different spheres, and then there's some overlap in between the 2 groups. So one is kind of like the theater kids, and one is like the people she goes to the Renaissance fair with, you know, like 2 different vibes that make sense for Heather to be a part of both of them. And then, you know, but yeah, I want to start thinking about the different characters in each of them. I think there will be about 8 characters altogether that I run through, and I start thinking like, okay, what is Heather's dynamic with this person? Were they friends because they're friends, or were they friends because their friends are friends, and so they're just kind of like thrown into the midst together, you know? How does her masking change between the different settings, and how have these individuals and these groups influenced Heather's personality traits and values? Wanted to start diving into that. If I can come up with a list of 8 names, to be completely honest with you, I will be very pleased. That would be a very big win for me. And then number 3, even if I don't have time to start getting into specific identities within the parallel universe, I definitely want to start thinking about the specific community that Aaron and Heather are living in. So I want to think about like, how will Heather and Aaron engage with that community, and how does the community engage with each other amongst themselves? You know, are there cliques? Is there do people mostly keep to themselves and whoever their housemate is? Like, what's the situation here, you know? Is there a bit of a combination of like everybody helps each other out, but there's definitely like what's the social structure? Is there a hierarchy? What would that even be based on? You know, that kind of a thing. I have already been kind of thinking about this and thinking about like what might create some cliques, but I still want to take time to like dive into that a little bit more. Also, I have to decide if everybody in the community is a human, because even though the idea is that most of the people who have been brought there have been brought from alternate Earths, who's to say that in a multiverse, who's to say that every time they engaged with an Earth, it was an Earth like ours? There's already aliens in canon interacting with the parallel universe's society. So, like, I don't know. I have to think about it. I have to think about how many more alien names I want to come up with. And also just like what makes the most sense world building wise, and what's going to be the most fun for me. I love an alien. I really do. I think it's a fun little time. Sometimes when you're writing a kind of dark story, you need something that's going to be a little silly goofy. And as somebody who frequently engages with dark topics through comedy, that is what I like to do. That is mostly it for this month, I believe. Only time will tell if I'm able to continue making progress, but fingers crossed. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you being here. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and leave a comment below. How are your writing projects going? Did you do NaNoWriMo this past month? If so, how did it go? Do you have any writing goals going into December? You can follow me in the links in the description box below, including my other channels where the 12 videos of Christmas are starting, and it'll be a fun time. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.